Before I jump in, let me introduce Kim. Kim is my business partner at Inquiry Institute, one of our senior trainers and coaches. And today she'll be adding in comments from time to time and also be our Zoom goddess, which we all know is really, really important. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. That's the world that we live in now. And it's so cool that we actually can have people from all over the world. I am completely delighted that you're here. Some of you I know, many of you I don't know, and I'm excited that you chose to spend this time with us today. There are also some of you who have read earlier editions of Change Your Questions, the first, second, and third. We'll talk about that in a bit. And some of you may be here because somebody told you to come and you have no idea why you're here, but that's really fine because there's things for you to learn and some practical things that will be useful for you too. So what I know about all of you is that you are naturally curious and you're committed to learning or you wouldn't be here. And those are two characteristics with two of my favorite people who love to learn and who are curious. So that already sets us up for a lively conversation today. And then I want to say that at Inquiry Institute, we're pretty excited because we have two books coming out in 2 weeks, August 23rd. The first is Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, 12 Powerful Tools for Leadership Coaching and Results. And at the same time, we're releasing the workbook. You can see the cover of it in the bottom right. And today, what we're focusing on is the Fable book, which is the lighter purple one. And we call it a Fable book because it is a fable. You'll be learning more about that in a few minutes. So here's what we're doing today, giving an overview and explaining why we're doing a fourth edition, introducing the choice map, and things that are new in the book. The user's guide is 12 Powerful Tools. It's been updated. There's a discussion guide and a glossary, also a new chapter, which we'll be talking about. And then the bonus for today is only if you're joining us live. So it's only available during the webinar. So if you're watching the replay, you won't be able to get it, unfortunately. And it's simply because we have a limited number of the bonus and we simply don't have enough for all the people who might want it. For those of you who are here, in order to get the bonus, you'll need to stay up until before the Q&A, because then at that point we'll explain the bonus and then we'll do a Q&A. You'll probably come up with questions during the time that we're together, and it would be really helpful if you would write them in the chat and put a big Q before it so that when we get to the end for the Q&A and Kim is scanning, it'll be easier for her to see the questions that you all are asking and wanting answers to.
So we're going to do a poll because our inquiring mind wants to know a little bit about you. So I am going to launch a poll that is, which of the following statements are true for you, and check all that apply. Have you read Change Your Questions, Change Your Life? Have you seen the choice map? Have you participated in training from Inquiry Institute? Or you're not familiar with any of the above. So we're going to launch it and give you a couple minutes to reply so we can know a little bit more about you. It's great. We have 88% of the people have read Change Your Questions, seen the choice map, and close to 40% have participated in training from Inquiry Institute. And a few are not familiar with any of the above.
Well, that's perfect because we designed the webinar today to cover all of that. If you're very familiar, that's great. If you're brand new, that's great. Slide says, why a fourth edition? Before I answer that, I want to say something about how the book came to be in the first place. I wrote a psychology textbook, a cognitive behavioral psychology textbook, entitled The Art of the Question. It was published in 1998, and it was a textbook. And I gave it to my brother to read, and he is a businessman. And I was it was my first book. I was very eager to get feedback from him, and I was proud and amazed that I had written a book, and he kept not getting back to me. And finally I called him and I said, well, you've got the book. Like, what do you think about it? I said kind of timidly, and his response changed my life, literally. He said, well, long pause, I made it through the first chapter. And a light bulb went off in my head. This is a businessman, and this is a psychology textbook, which is full of theory. And I realized at that moment that I needed to write a book that was really accessible and simple, and that would present the theory in a way that it was very practical and usable. The first edition of Change Your Questions, Change Your Life came out in 2004, and there's been a second edition and a third. Each one, I've been able to add things that I've learned, which is pretty exciting. Add new tools, add new material, and there are definitely new things in this fourth edition. So let's see, about the fourth edition. What I'm particularly excited about is there is new material in this that came both from students that I've had. I taught leadership for 10 years at American University and now teach at Case Western Reserve. And I've learned so much from my students in those settings. I've learned so much from the people who've been in our courses at Inquiry Institute, and there are a lot of you who are here, both the shorter courses and the Chief Question Officer course. You teach me all the time. There's also a lot I've learned about leadership and about coaching and about teams and meetings from working with you all and working the material. There is in particular, and we'll get to that. I'll get to the table of contents in a minute, and then I can point out what's new. But the next slide says, what is Change Your Questions? So I said a little bit about how it came to be, but I haven't said anything really about what it is. So it is written as a fable book. It's the story of Ben, who is, and he's been hired as a leader, except that he has great technical skills, terrible people skills, and he is failing as a leader. And so his boss, Alexa, sends him to a coach, Joseph, who teaches him all the material that's in the book, but through the story. And so Ben, who initially was proud of being an answer man, discovers, to his chagrin and then to his pleasure, that he needed to become a question man. And by the end of the book, he has become what we call an inquiring leader, and that's the title of the last chapter, actually. But that's all the journey. That's the 2 feet that is Ben's journey. It's also a book about teams, and leadership is all obviously about communicating and collaborating. And you might be surprised to see the icon of the wedding ring there. And that's because 2 chapters of the story have to do with Ben's relationship with his wife, Grace. And I put in those 2 chapters because it was really important to me that people get that the material, both the mindset material and the question thinking material, which we'll get to in a few moments, it's life-changing to use this, to know how to ask ourselves better questions and to know what mindset we're in and switch if we want to. When we change how we think and how we communicate, we take that self with us everywhere in our lives. So we take that self to work, we take that self home. And it is very frequent that people will say to me and to others of our trainers, this was really great and all that, but the best thing is I have a better relationship with my husband or my wife or my kids or my in-laws. That makes me particularly happy because it means they're really using the material in the book. Let's take a quick look what's inside. And I'm not going to read all the chapters. You can look over them. What's bolded is what's obviously new. So the chapter on switching strategies, body and mind, was very important for me to put in, because people always wonder, why does this work so well? And one of the reasons it works so well is because we teach people the how to of switching from what we call judger mindset to learner mindset. Switching strategies includes not just changing our questions and changing your life, so you can see where that goes, but also being able to ask ourselves and others questions that really matter. And switching turns out to be something that is really validated now in the world of neuroscience. So that switching strategies chapter strengthens the reasoning behind why the work works so well. And it was very exciting to write it and to do all the learning I did for it. And I'm sure I'll be doing more. You also see highlighted a discussion guide. We did that because you all asked for it. Actually, the first moment I knew we needed to do that is when somebody from the Department of Justice called us and said, well, we've started a book club based on Change Your Questions. And I went, oh my goodness, that means we haven't provided something that they need for a book club. So now we've got the discussion guide, and there's also a glossary. So those are the obvious new things. However, integrated throughout is a lot of new learning about leadership, about teams, about collaboration, about thinking critically and strategically. And so there are hundreds and hundreds of changes that are little tiny ones. The big ones are the ones that are bolded right here. Let's take a look inside. In the middle of this slide, you see the choice map. For some of you, the choice map has become your best friend, and it's the core of, and it illustrates the core of what we do. So it illustrates, if you look in the thought bubbles, questions that we're asking ourselves, that's question thinking. And then you also see we have two mindsets, learner mindset and judger mindset. And you'll notice that there's a switching lane connecting them. And that's partly where the switching strategies really comes to play, and why it's so important. Very often people look at the choice map and I've heard them say, man, I live in the judger pit. You mean there's a way to get out? And the answer is yes, there's a way to get out. And that's what the book is. In fact, there is a saying about theory and practice, which are two things I care about a lot. There's a man named Kurt Lewin who said, there's nothing so practical as a good theory. And you see that played out on the choice map. And practical is one of the main words that people use when they talk about this work. To the left of that, you see the user's guide, and then you also see the discussion guide, which you can't read, but you'd see it there, and then also the glossary. I want to talk about how you can use the discussion guide. And then I'm going to say a little bit more about the Fable book. The discussion guide is meant to be used in multiple different ways, and you may come up with some of your own ways. You can use the discussion guide in thinking through things for yourself, because it can be very useful for that. There's some provocative and generative questions in there. You can read the book with a learning buddy, either at work or at home, and have conversations about it ongoingly. Many people do that. And it's always fun to hear about some of the conversations they have when they do that. You can also use the discussion guide with a team. We do a lot of work with teams here. And one of the ways that a team can use it is everybody reads the book, and then we use the material in the book to really focus on how their team operates. Typically, teams are more judger than learner, and we teach them ways to get learner together. You can also use it if you're a coach or a manager or a leader, and you want to have more worthwhile conversations, including feedback conversations with the people around you, because there's a lot of guidance and ideas in the story itself that will help you do that.
Also, the QT tools in the back, the 12 tools, builds the awareness and skills that are necessary. So they're intertwined with the discussion guide also. So it's not just discussing the concepts in the book, but it allows you to utilize the tools and build the skills of awareness and question asking, and really building that awareness of your mindsets throughout. And so you can be doing that with your team or your client if you're a coach.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the things that led to the discussion guide is all the things that I've done since I wrote The Art of the Question. First of all, I left being a full-time therapist and psychologist, and I decided that the material was powerful enough that it should have a wider spread. And I wanted that to happen. So to my surprise, The Art of the Question and then Change Your Questions has taken us to some amazing places. One of the first was the National Defense University, to my surprise. They used it for strategic thinking. There are many government agencies now that use this material for team coaching and for leadership coaching, and even for the culture of that organization, like DHS and the Federal Reserve Board and NASA and Treasury Executive Institute. And I always tell them that teaching this work in government is one of the most patriotic things that I can do, and I love doing it. It's also taken us into healthcare. We did a lot of work with nurse leaders at Johns Hopkins, which was really just a delight to do. It's taken us, as I'm saying these things, I'm saying them so you can get some ideas about the applications of the material and the many different places that it can be used. So we've done workshops like at Johnson & Johnson, tons of training for coaches at Lockheed Martin. I've spoken for Harvard Leadership. Last week, I was in New Orleans working with a leadership team of one of the international baccalaureate schools, which was really exciting. And it's taken us all over the world. Kim, I think 7 years ago, Kim and I spent a month in Asia, in Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and in Beijing doing this work. And it was very exciting. I have to say, one of the benefits of COVID for us is that we discovered that we could do this work globally through Zoom. We now have people literally from all over the world who are using the book. And the book is, it's become an international bestseller. It's sold over 400,000 copies. It's in 22 languages. And that says something important. It doesn't say something important particularly about me because I'm not famous, but it does say something about the work. It says that the work works, because most of the sales are, it's called word of mouth sales or pass along sales. That means somebody read it, got something, and said to somebody else, you need to read this too. It will make a difference for you. So that is incredibly satisfying for us. And when we do our courses now, our public courses, they're all on Zoom. And we've had people from Poland who had to translate. I mean, it's just very cool. And the discussion guide is sort of helps summarize what we've learned from doing all of those things.
It allowed many times people would call me up and how do I work with this with a team? And I would pull from our courses, you know, because it's not just jumping from judger to learner, but it's building the awareness, building those skills, and that judger doesn't go anywhere. So we started really working with the discussion guide to have, when you work with individuals and groups, that they're building that awareness and skills also, and that compassion to oneself when you know your judger's not going anywhere. It's a lifelong journey.
Kim, a quick thing about that. Just about judger and learner. Some of you have never heard those terms before. Some of you know them very, very well. As you read the book and as you listen to this conversation and to some of the questions, know that we have both those mindsets, learner and judger. They're both normal. We will always have both. It is not a question of putting down or putting away or dismissing judger. Sometimes it has something very valuable for us. So it's not a question of getting rid of. It's a question of learning how to manage our judger. We had a few judger moments before we started this morning because we weren't sure about the Zoom address. And you learn how to use switching to get past all of that. So that is very, very cool.
With your wonderful enthusiasm for being on today and desiring to know more about the fourth edition, you can pre-order your fourth edition today. And we're releasing on the 23rd, and you will be receiving it either on the day of August 23rd or a day after. But Amazon, I think, says that you'll get it on the day of. And at inquiryinstitute.com/book launch, you'll also be able to order the brand new workbook, and both are available for pre-order, and you can download excerpts from each. Now, for question and answers, will these be available on Amazon.ca or only US? No, the fourth edition will be available not only in Canada, but in certain places in Europe. I know it's the fourth edition, and we're talking about the English version is on Amazon France, Amazon Germany. Have you considered other kinds of mindsets than Judger that we can switch from? Judger has a wide range.
Yeah, but let me take that for a moment, because some of you may have heard of the work of Carol Dweck. She wrote a really fine book called Mindsets, The Psychology of Success. We developed our work independently in the end of the 90s and beginning of the century. Oh God, that sounds like a long time ago. Most of her work the research for it is in education. Most of my research for this is in the world of psychology and coaching. She talks about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. They are roughly equivalent to judger and learner, and there's some important differences, but there are no contradictions. So I recommend her work. I'm just very happy that people are talking about mindsets and realizing how important they are, because it gives us a real advantage in how we live our lives moment by moment.
No, Marilee, the question, what compelled you guys to write more about leadership in teams?
I have an enduring fascination with leadership, and leadership is not just by position or authority. It's basically having an attitude of being responsible for the whole and being willing to go forward and do that. I've learned so much from my clients, as I mentioned before. And when I spent those 10 years at American University and really was able to dig in to the leadership challenges that my students were facing, because they were all pretty high up leaders in the government. And it became increasingly fascinating to me that, because with the Change Your Questions, it's actually the book that got me into AU, because one of the leaders of the program read the book and then got in touch with me. And he said, it's really important to us to have our leaders ask lots of questions and be inquiring. And your book is about that, so that's why I was teaching there. Every time I work in a different company or a different agency or a different industry, I learn more, and then I can add more into it. And this is actually a very long conversation, so I'm not going to go deeper into it, but those are the main reasons. You know what? I'm going to answer this question about ADHD. As a person who has a family member with ADHD, I'm interested in how neurology can impact a person, thus their outlook. The whole book is about that. It is not specifically about ADHD, but there is a lot that you can apply from the book to coaching clients who have ADHD or living with family members. And there are coaches who specialize in treating people with ADHD who use the book with their clients. So that might be useful. I hope it is. I want to close us out with going back to what Kim said about creating a learner world. Judger is more, I'm going to hold this up, the more reactive, automatic part of us. It's more negative and it can end us up in the judger pit. Learner is more curious and devoted to learning, not criticizing, and to growing and exploring. And as you can see, path goes off the page because there are infinite possibilities from learner, not from judger. So when we talk about creating a learner world, we're talking about helping to create a tipping point of individuals, teams, organizations, families who can develop the habit and the skills of living from learner, knowing that judger will always be there and we can learn to manage it. Creating a learner world for us is something that's very concrete and that I'm really devoted to. That's behind everything that we do.
We want to thank everybody for coming today, for your enthusiasm, to hearing about what's new, and to spreading the word and to making it more of a learner world. Marilee?
That's a perfect way to end because that really is the goal.
Thank you, everybody.